Welcome to News Cafe. I'm Mitzi Borromeo. Tonight, we get into the mind of Presidential Assistant for Rehabilitation and Recovery, Panfilo Ping Lacson. Secretary Lacson was appointed last December by President Benigno Aquino III as Rehab Czar to act as overall manager and coordinator of rehabilitation and recovery in the areas devastated by Super Typhoon Yolanda. Good evening, Secretary Lacson.
Good evening, Mitzi, and thank you for having me.
Well, great to have you. So, sir, you recently submitted the master plan for Yolanda, which is called the Yolanda Comprehensive Rehabilitation and Recovery Plan, or CRRP, and this is an 8,000-page, 8-volume document. Can you give us a brief summary of what's in this?
Well, the salient points.
Yes.
We focused on 4 major sectors: infrastructure, livelihood, social services, and resettlement, because these are the 4 priority sectors or areas.
Right.
We need to resettle 205,128 housing units that were previously located in hazard zones.
Right.
So they need to be relocated to suitable sites for resettlement. That's one. We need to provide either construction materials or financial assistance to some 1,010,000 families displaced by Yolanda, whose houses were in the safe zones when Yolanda struck. But nevertheless, we need to assist them by way of providing them the construction materials that they need and or financial assistance.
Right. So, sir, you had to come up with this document. You started in July, didn't you? So this is,
yes.
You have said that this is something unprecedented because the data validation was quite extensive.
Yeah,
Can you tell
extensive.
us how you came up with this massive document?
We did some out-of-the-box approaches. No? One, we did a bottom-up approach. We fielded technical consultants to coordinate with local government executives, especially those that are not capacitated to do or prepare their rehabilitation plans. We call it the LRRPs, or Local Government Unit Rehabilitation and Recovery Plans.
Okay.
And then we also did a cluster framework approach. So we organized the different cabinet secretaries into basically 5 clusters. Infrastructure cluster headed by Secretary Singson, resettlement cluster headed by the Vice President, Jojo Marbinay, social services cluster headed by Secretary Dinky Soliman, and the livelihood cluster headed by DTI Secretary Domingo. And then there's a support cluster co-chaired by NEDA Secretary Balisacan and DBM Secretary Abad.
Right. Very.
So we would meet every now and then to discuss the action plans that their respective clusters were supposed to prepare and submit to us.
Right.
And then we started aligning the numbers or reconcile the numbers submitted by the LGUs, the local government units, with those of the cluster groups. And then we also need to reconcile the numbers with the PDNA, the Post-Disaster Needs Assessment, which was presented to the President and the Cabinet last May 16.
Yeah.
We also need to reconcile this with the numbers in RAY. Remember, last December 18, NEDA presented to the different ambassadors and the different stakeholders, multilaterals and bilaterals, RAY 1, which I believe at the time, they estimated the damage and losses at 306 billion pesos.
Right. Well, we'll talk more about that later. I'd like to talk about the funding for something of this grand scale requires grant funding. So at the moment, where are we now? How is it in terms of allocating funds?
Well, we need a total, an aggregate amount of 170.9 billion pesos. 37 billion has already been downloaded by DBM to the different agencies. Some of the monies were already used for implementation, like, for example, to repair this is what we call no regrets projects. These are projects that we have to do anyway, like municipal halls.
Okay.
Most of the municipal buildings were destroyed by Yolanda, and so DILG was tasked by the President to download resources to the mayors to rebuild their municipal buildings, also public markets and civic centers. Department of Health was given 1 billion pesos to rebuild or reconstruct the RHUs, the rural health units. So according to, and I was told by Secretary Ona that he already downloaded 500 million pesos to the different mayors. And upon accomplishment of 50% accomplishment, he would download the remaining balance.
So when you say
500 million.
download, that means it's been disbursed. They have the
Disbursed
money.
to the local government
Has been spent.
executives, yes. And then what else? Department of Environment and Natural Resources.
Right.
They have 2 billion pesos at their disposal. I think 1 billion has already been disbursed to address the mitigation measures that can be applied in those areas that may be used as controlled areas, meaning we can still make use of the real estate there, provided we employ some mitigation measures like mangrove rehabilitation and replanting, seawalls even, beach forests, and the like.
Because to build more resilient, you have to face a lot of these environmental issues. It's not just about the proper housing. It's how to
because the president's call is build back better.
Yes.
So we should up the numbers. No?
Exactly. Yeah. So, sir, you've also mentioned that the private sector has been very instrumental. We've received a lot of cash and non-cash values.
That is
correct.
Is
there an inventory? Is your office keeping an inventory of all of this, or is there another office? How are the funds managed and processed?
Yes, we don't intervene with the private sector when they implement their projects. We just guide them and point to them the areas that need their intervention. Last January 7, because I already anticipated the gaps, that the usual bureaucracy in government would face. And so we called upon the private sector, and the top corporations responded overwhelmingly. We had like a bridal registry
That's
mode.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, because we divided the 171 cities and municipalities into 24 clusters. We clustered them into 24 groups. And then we offered them to the private sectors, take your pick. Now, these are the areas. And so top corporations would pick for any reason. I'll give an example.
Yes, please. Clear.
Metrobank, George T. He told me personally, I'd like to take on Palo because of some sentimental reasons. Because when I was a very young man of 22, the father of Ramon Pedrosa approached him and taught him how to go into banking. And since he became a very successful banker, the first thing that came to his mind is to take on Palo because the Pedrosas are from Palo. And Dika Aboitis, when I talked to him, I'll take on Cebu because we're so attached to Cebu, and then I'll also take on Ormoc and Baybay because that's where our family started.
So they adopted their cities.
They adopted the cities, the areas based on, so many reasons.
How do you ensure that this funding is used properly? Because there's been concern about how it's been spent, that progress has been slow. How are you sure that, how are the checks and balances in terms of funding?
Well, the checks and balances would come from the CSOs, the civil society organizations, the NGOs, and our own monitoring from our office. If you notice, we have put up an IT group, and very soon we'll come up with a website, and we will be able to monitor what's happening on the ground. But that will come when the implementation comes in full blast. But in the meantime, we relied on the corporate best practices because we believe that corporations, especially those publicly listed, will not risk their reputation in the business community. If they will engage in some shenanigans. So we relied on that. And, as they say, beggars cannot be choosers. So they responded very enthusiastically. And we owe it to them to just leave them alone. Just guide them. Will you please take on these areas because there are no takers? Things like that. We were also coordinating, and this to me is the biggest challenge, coordination, because we have been coordinating and we continue to coordinate with so many stakeholders. We're talking of the private sector, we're talking of the different departments and line agencies in the government, we're talking of multilaterals like the different countries that contributed and
many different cultures, different
yeah,
protocols.
different cultures, different protocols.
Yeah.
We have to deal with bilaterals like JICA, USAID, and so far the coordination is going very smoothly.
So you said that the time frame, by 2016, you expect 80 to 85%
Yes,
done. Are we
because
still
that
on
is
track?
a realistic estimate of how much we can do.
Yeah.
Given also the term limits given to the president.
Right. So in terms of lags, you see that sometimes it's not very easy to get the work
It is
carried
not
out.
easy.
Yeah, so people on the ground who are still complaining that they haven't received aid. But you were saying that in other places like where Katrina struck in the U.S. and Indonesia, it's also taken a bit of time.
Yes, because it's not really easy to prepare a rehabilitation plan. And government agencies, the line agencies, cannot just implement because they're bound by COA rules and regulations. They're bound by laws, no? Because without any approved budget, and the budget can only be approved when a plan is in place.
Right.
And that's the reason why, as I mentioned earlier, we resorted to a bottom-up approach. And we cleared with the president if we can do a phased implementation of projects, programs, and activities.
Right.
And he acceded to that. And that's the reason why last July 2025, as announced in the SONA, he already approved implementation in 6 LGUs.
That's what we're going to talk about next.
Yeah.
We just need to take this quick break. News Cafe will be right back. Welcome back to News Cafe. I'm talking to Rehab Czar Secretary Ping Lacson. So in the President's State of the Nation address, he finally gave the approval for your rehabilitation activities, and he stated 5? Is it 5 specific?
6, yeah.
6, sorry.
5 provinces and 1 city.
Yes.
That's Tacloban.
Yes. So where do we go from now that he's finally approved it? This speeds up the process.
Yes.
That happens.
Yeah, because if we will wait for all 171 cities and municipalities along the Yolanda corridor, it will take a long time.
Right.
And that's the reason why we thought of clearing with him to approve a phased implementation of those LGUs that would be able to submit their rehabilitation plan subject to vetting by the cluster groups to be implemented already.
Well, President Aquino also paid tribute to all the international aid that came in. He said thank you to the ambassadors of the different countries.
Right.
Many have also said that we've relied too much on international aid. Do you think that this is really something important, that they're saying that government hasn't really helped much?
Yeah, let's put it this way. When Yolanda struck, the whole world came, no? Without even us asking them to come.
It's true.
And they really helped unconditionally. And they're still there, no, helping out the survivors of Yolanda. So it's but fitting to give recognition, and that's what the president did during the SONA, because they really helped us a lot. For example, USAID has given us a grant of $10 million. That's to OPAR, to my office. But that's not in cash, no? That's in the form of technical support and assistance. The same resources we also use to field technical consultants that we recruited, of course, with their concurrence, if these are qualified people, to go to the local government units and engage them and assist them prepare their rehabilitation plans, deal with the numbers, with the figures, and how to go about preparing their own rehabilitation plans.
So for your office, how exactly do you go about processing, approving projects at your office at PAR?
We are not approving projects. It's the line agencies, the cluster groups that will approve the projects.
Okay.
Our job here is merely to coordinate.
Okay.
No, I'm called the rehabilitation czar, but I have no implementation powers.
Okay.
I have no control over the budget.
Okay.
All I do is coordinate with these different agencies. And even Dr. Contoro Mangkusubroto, the rehab czar of Banda Aceh, when he came to visit us, he visited us 3 times to give us some pointers on how to deal with rehabilitation or rehabilitating a disaster-stricken area. And that's the role model in the international community. And he was telling me that the biggest challenge that he faced was coordination. And I thought he was saying it quite lightly, only to realize that that's really a tough or a big challenge.
Yes, and of course
face.
you're faced with a lot of criticism. It's good you clarified your role because some people have been talking about how they weren't really receiving aid from your office. For example, there's a group called People Surge. They've been calling for your resignation because they claim they haven't received aid. So what is your reaction to
I have no control over the budget, and it is impractical to just give the survivors, especially those residing along the coastline, because People Surge has been asking the national government to just give 40,000 pesos to the families. But, it's easy. Government has the resources. We can give out, or government can give out 40,000 pesos in assistance to these families. But where will they build their houses? In the same areas where they were hit, and some or most of the family members got, perished after the storm surge. We cannot do that because government has the responsibility to relocate them to safe areas.
And for those who say, the tent cities, they're still not really livable, some of the conditions. They say that even now, 9 months on, they're still living in such terrible and mabaho daw, madume. So what is being done about
well,
the situation?
tents should have been dismantled by now because the Social Services Cluster Head, Secretary Soliman, we had an agreement. This was, I think, early part of July or later part of June, that by July 31, nobody will still be or would still be living in tents. But she is addressing that problem. I don't know how many more are still living in tents right now. But the international standards, I was also informed by Pakuntoro on this, the transitional houses like bunk houses or what they call in Indonesia's barracks, that's only good for 2 years. And after 2 years, all bunk houses, all transitional shelters should be dismantled. We are trying to comply with that protocol.
Well, you called out some bunk houses which were subpar. No? What happened there? What exactly happened in the situation?
It's good that we called their attention because when I visited the corridor, that was 3 days after I took my oath in Malacanang, I visited the devastated area, some of the areas anyway, along with my undersecretary, because at the time we were a team of 2. We had not organized yet. It's only lately that we became a family of 104. And most of the people that you see here are technical consultants that are receiving their salaries from USAID, from the technical assistance, and the UNDP, United Nations Development Program. So I'm counting with my fingers. I think we're only 11 or 13 government employees here. Most of the people here are technical consultants.
So they're the ones who really go into the field and study and get the numbers, get the statistics. So in terms of the bunk houses that you called out, you said that they were under-spec'd and there were substandard materials. There were substituting of materials. So apparently you found 10 politicians who were getting kickbacks. Is that right?
At least one politician.
At least one, okay.
And I requested the PNP and the CIDG to conduct their investigation. And true enough, 836,000 pesos worth of a bunkhouse unit. When the investigation report was submitted to me, one of the findings there is that only 500,000 pesos was consumed or used in the construction of bunkhouses. They did that by using substandard materials. So I would like to think that we nipped it in the bud because after that, they stopped constructing bunkhouses. And Secretary Singson, when I informed him, he stopped paying the contractors that built those substandard bunkhouses.
So you can say with confidence that that kind of situation will not happen again?
Well, I would like to feel confident, but we lack the teeth to really look over the shoulders of all these shenanigans or the bad contractors.
Well, I'd like to just read to you one of the excerpts from the SONA that President Aquino spoke specifically on Yolanda. He said, hindi nagpatumpik-tumpik sa pagresponde ang inyong gobyerno. Nagmadali tayong linisin ang airport. Kaya sa loob ng 24 oras matapos ang bagyo, nakapasok na ang tatlong nating C-130 na may dalang ayuda. And he went on to say that the DOH came, the Bureau of Fire Prevention, DSWD. So apparently all of these relief operations were on right away, but victims on the ground say this was not the case. What are your findings?
Well, that can be explained. You know, when you're a survivor, when you're a victim, 9 months is really too long. No?
True.
And I would say 6 months is too long. Even 1 month is too long for a survivor to, you know, live day by day without roof on the top of their heads, without livelihood, without food. That's really a long time. And we understand them. But there's a lot of disinformation going on that government has not really responded well. And there, you know, I don't know the motive behind it. But I don't want to speculate. But all I can say is that I can understand the survivors.
Yeah.
But those who keep on agitating and instigating, you know, it doesn't help the government and it doesn't help the survivors.
True. Well, let's talk about the challenges of the job. You've compared your situation to that of General MacArthur, where he had such a difficult task in his hands, and so did you, except he had a lot more support, and you claim that you didn't really have all this support at your disposal.
Yeah, the Marshall Plan, you know, I was not the one who compared myself to MacArthur, to General MacArthur. It was the interviewer.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Who was making the comparison. And I said, in some ways, in a way, there's a comparison, but the comparison ends in the task, the daunting task or the challenge. It ends there. But if we compare the powers, the authority given to Douglas MacArthur and to myself, it really falls apart.
Because basically you were thrown into the job. I mean, you didn't really have an office. This office was donated to you by a generous businessman.
Yes, that is correct.
You didn't have your exact staff. So why did you decide to take on this job? I mean, I know you were having sleepless nights thinking how you could help victims.
You know, if you were in my shoes, I don't think you would reject such an offer or decline such an offer, because this is for a humanitarian cause. You know? If I was given a war mission, for example, I would definitely ask how much firepower and how much logistics I had before accepting. But since this is, you know, helping out alleviate the situation or the living conditions of the survivors, then I don't think you or I will decline such offer, or anybody for that matter.
That's true, and you're doing so much. Even your office is selling the artwork of the kids from Dulag Leyte. I've seen the artwork all around. So there are, in many ways, you're always looking for creative ways to help. So in terms, you've also faced a lot of opposition, even in Tacloban, from militant groups. So how do you handle, of course, there's politics in this. No?
Well, basically, we'll have to ignore them and just focus on our job, because our job is to propose funding support, you know, by way of submitting a master rehabilitation plan, which we already did. Our job is mainly to coordinate with the attached agencies of the NRIMC, the National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council. Our job is basically to coordinate with local government executives and so forth and so on. So we just focus on our job, and I'm thankful to my staff that they have, you know, met the self-imposed deadline. Actually, that was my deadline.
They have a good leader putting this.
Because when I asked for the approval of the phase implementation, I told the president the comprehensive rehabilitation plan would be forthcoming, and I assured him that it would be on its table by August 1.
Yeah. You've also called for speeding up preparations ahead of the Pope's visit. So you're hoping that by January, things will be in more order.
Well, between now and January, I think because of the massive infusion of resources on account of the approval of the 5 or 6 LGUs, and then I just hope that the comprehensive plan will be approved sooner than later. Then we'll have things will get moving faster.
That's good to hear. All right, we'll take another short break. When we return, we'll talk to Secretary Lacson about his civil service career. Welcome back to News Cafe. We are talking to Secretary Ping Lacson. So Secretary, let's talk about your civil service career. Starting with the PNP, you're known for your no-nonsense, sterling reputation there. Tell us about some of the highlights of your time.
Well, that's my crowning glory. As far as my public service career, I would say that my stint, especially when I was Chief PNP, as my defining moment. It's when you feel people start to appreciate what you're doing, then there's this feeling of self-fulfillment.
Right.
And I got that when I served as Chief PNP for 14 months, for a mere 14 months. I got approval and trust rating very high at that time. I was rating even higher than most of the cabinet secretaries. I was rating
the highest in the PNP's history.
The highest in the PNP. Even the PNP itself as an institution.
58% public approval for PNP, 78% for rating for yourself, on you.
Yeah,
on you
and the public approval would be the biggest reward that a public servant can get.
Right. You're known for making some serious reforms at the PNP. For example, you won the confidence of businessmen and foreign investors and the cooperation of the general public when you had more coordination with law enforcement agencies, both here and abroad in the fight against drugs, for example, and crime. How did you go about instituting these reforms? Because you needed to take some risks.
I consider leadership example as second to none. Because if you want to reform an institution, you should start with yourself. And that's what I did. When I stopped Kotong, I couldn't imagine a commander, for example, telling his people not to mulct from motorists, from vegetable dealers, when their chief PNP would be getting, bribe from, say, wetting operators. So I stopped Kotong at the level of the rank and file, and I stopped it at the level of the chief PNP.
Right.
And then I started reforming the police because, to me, how can we serve the public well when the institution that you're leading is not disciplined itself? So I even instituted reforms like 34-inch waistline, but that's symbolic because I wanted them to look physically fit, not only look, but really
be fit.
To be fit, Because again, I cannot imagine a cop running after a pickpocket or a snatcher with big tummies.
Obese or mahirap nga naman, no? It's difficult to be in that position. Now, as senator, you ran for senator in the 2001 elections.
I think that was my reward.
That was your...
Because I had no background or exposure to politics. In fact, when I was Chief PNP and I was asked if I had plans of, entering politics, top of mind, I answered or I replied by saying, I hate politics, and to put it more bluntly, I hate politicians.
And you found yourself there.
Yeah, I found myself being a politician, but I still hate politicians, Mitzi.
But you work in this. It's difficult. You hate them because you don't like the bureaucracy.
Yes.
So what is it about politics that you hate the most?
Well, when you're a senator or a congressman, when you're a legislator, the first thing that comes to mind, at least public mind, is pork barrel.
Right.
And that's the reason why I decided to forego the yearly allocation.
You're very much against that.
Yeah, I was very much against it. And I felt, on hindsight, I felt it was like a ticking bomb ready to explode. And exploded already when the Napolis caper came out and exploded. Then I was talking to some of my former colleagues, and they would tell me, Ping, we should have followed your lead, just to.
You were ahead of your time then.
Yeah, that's what they were telling me.
Now, when this scandal came out, you also came out with your own list. So people were criticizing you also because ang daming lists, and then this is also the height of Yolanda. So how did this list come about?
By accident, because the family of Napoles, Jimmy, I didn't know him before he came over, because it was Mrs. Napoles herself who asked that she be given an audience, not necessarily siya mismo, but at least she sent members of her family to right there in my office. And I was asking the courier, the messenger, why me? And Mr. Napoles told him that siya lang kasi walang pork barrel. So siya lang yung pwedeng siguro mapagsabihan kung ano yung gusto namin sabihin. So it started that way, and he, or the husband, Jimmy, left a list of legislators, including an unsigned affidavit.
Okay.
And that's how it all started.
Right. And this is also the time that you faced a lot of tension with Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago. So of course,
who even called me a gay. You know?
Oh, this name calling, word wars.
Again, officially, I'm not gay.
Well, ano-ano na lang lumalabas,
Yes,
no, pag may away. But now that you recently said that you've taken down all animosity because now she's
and in all
dealing with
sincerity,
cancer.
I said, and I'll still say, that I will continue praying for her recovery.
Right.
Call it miraculous or whatever, but we should all, you know, as Catholics, as Christians, to really pray for, you know, recover somebody who is stricken with cancer.
Right. It's difficult. So a lot that you have to deal with in politics, even your time at PNP. Now, since we were talking about PDAF and corruption, you know, in terms of with police and military, we also know there's been some corruption there, and many have also been linked to Enrile. How has this changed over the years? Because you instituted a lot of reforms, but unfortunately, some of this torture and bad practices
it started when I ran for senator, because at the time, ex-President JMA already took over. And this just an opinion, and some friends also advanced this idea that the reason why they pounced on me after I left the PNP, because I tendered my courtesy resignation, but they presented it as if I was sacked by, of course, whatever. But when I ran for the Senate, I started receiving all these criticisms from the new administration, and it's as if they were really bent on putting me in jail, as early as 2001. So, and they linked me to drugs, kidnapping, all crimes, and at the time, I thought I should not respond to the diatribes, the criticisms of the new administration. And somebody, I think it was Senator Pimentel, who advised me, you should respond to all the attacks, because people, you know, start to believe all the all the criticisms. And that's the lesson I learned, that when you are criticized, you must be able to respond right away, because it will linger in the minds of people. If you don't respond, it's as if you're admitting.
Deal with it. If you're not guilty, then you know, face it. Do you have any regrets about maybe some of the actions you did or didn't do throughout your career?
Regrets is first. I think I regret entering politics.
I think you're stuck, Secretary.
Yeah, I'm stuck. You know,
there's a lot of work ahead of you.
20 years in the military. 10 years in the police, and then another 12 years as a senator, and then now. So,
well, let's talk about some of your accomplishments. You authored a lot of laws, just to name some of them: the Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002, Absentee Voting Act, Anti-Hueting and Illegal Numbers Games, the National Service Training Program Act of 2001. Is there something that really stands out for you?
Yeah,
most significant.
Just a pretender, but it's the Anti-Red Tape Act.
Ah, yes. I didn't get to that because it's a long list.
One of my most significant bills enacted into law. You know, the anti-red tape is a big contribution to fighting corruption, because in that bill, some of the features of the law, of the act itself, is giving any agency just 5 working days to approve a simple transaction, and 10 days to approve a complex transaction.
Right.
No, and there are penalties if the heads of agencies will not or act accordingly, or in compliance with the provisions of the law.
Yeah, very important. Now, you worked under different administrations. What was it like working with different presidents?
Well, different presidents have different styles of leadership styles. President Marcos, I had no direct dealings with him because I was then a segundo camote that rose from the ranks, all the way hanggang naging lieutenant colonel. And then under President Cory, also I didn't have any
direct dealings,
dealings with her. I was only dealing with the chief PNP at the time, General Nazareno. Under President Ramos, well, he knows me personally because we were together in the defunct Philippine Constabulary. And so But then it was during the presidency of President Erap, that I started to be in the corridors of power, so to speak.
Yes, here you were.
Because I was appointed chief PNP, and even before that, when he
Right.
was vice president, we were already together in the PACC, Presidential Anti-Crime Commission
Right.
at the time. I was heading one of the task forces, Task Force Abagat. And then, of course, fast forward, President or Pinoy,
Yes.
and here I am.
Yeah.
With a cabinet
Right.
rank.
You were known to be a close confidant of President Aquino, although you're not in the cabinet.
I'm not in the cabinet. I'm not a close confidant. We were just together in the Senate. And
He confides in you.
yeah,
He gets
when we were in the
advice from you.
Senate,
Yeah.
we became close because we were, I think, adhering to the same advocacies. Like during budget deliberations, we would be staying up late,
Right.
interpolating the sponsors of the budget.
Yeah. So, of course, spending time together, working together really brings you closer together. Now, we'll take another short break. When we return, we'll know more about Secretary Lacson's life beyond politics. You're watching News Cafe, and we are speaking with Secretary Ping Lacson. So we'll talk about growing up for you. Sir, you grew up in Imus, Cavite.
Yeah.
What was it like, your childhood?
Well, I was born to poor parents. My mother was a market vendor. My father was a jeepney driver. So we grew up with poor parents.
Yeah.
And so, but my parents were passionate about sending us all to school.
Great.
And so after high school, I wanted to be a lawyer at the time because I wanted to become an NBI agent because I had really
You had
passion
it in you na pala.
for law enforcement.
Oo.
So, but the entry point to become an NBI agent is to become a lawyer. So I took up pre-law in the Lyceum of the Philippines, but I didn't finish because I was admitted to the PMA, having passed the entrance examination. I think it was in 1967. Funny thing because I didn't have any intention of going to PMA. A high school friend of mine invited me to join him because he was quite afraid or fearful of, getting the entrance examination. So why don't you join me?
By accident.
And I ended up getting an application for myself, filling it up.
Yeah.
And then he failed, I passed. And the irony of it, after 8 years, when I was already, I think, a captain in the defunct Metrocom, I arrested him for some crime.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that was the first encounter I had with him after we took the PMA exams
Wow.
together.
Great story.
So, yeah.
You also spent a big deal of time in Cebu. You're known as the adopted son of Cebu.
Yeah, I was assigned in Cebu as Metro Discom Commander. That was in 1989. And I had two turnovers of command there because the first turnover, because we're supposed to serve only for 2 years. So after serving 2 years, I was supposed to be transferred to Luzon. But then during the turnover ceremony, the mobile phone of the regional director rang. And then he stood for a while, and when he came back, he announced to the audience, there's a slight change in today's ceremonies. The turnover will not proceed anymore because I received a call from the president that Colonel Lacson should still stay.
Yes.
And I found out that it was the governor of Cebu, Lito Osmeña at the time, who called up President Cory and requested that I be extended.
So no way out of it, huh? People just...
Yes, so I stayed there for another, for several months more until I got transferred to Laguna.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've been moving around a lot also. Now in terms of your family, you're so busy, you're such a workaholic. How is time spent with the family? Do you even have time?
Absentee father, absentee husband. That's how a military officer or police officer.
So that's how it's been.
That's normal.
They know what it's like, yeah. So what do you do to relax? Because you need some time naman, you need some downtime.
Well, right now I have no, except, watching DVDs and then maybe browsing. That's all there's to it. I'm not into sports anymore, but I do treadmill exercises every other day, and if I have the time.
So I heard that you also like to drive to kind of distress. So driving
that's correct. Driving alone. Just, but not so much right now because of the traffic. Before, I would drive all the way to Tagaytay and back. I used to do that.
Gets you thinking, time alone. Now you're a big
stress.
Right. You're a big basketball fan. You follow LeBron James. So you've been moving between Miami Heat and the Cavs.
My favorite team before he joined Miami was Cleveland Cavaliers. And then he moved to Miami, so I turned into a Miami Heat fan. Now I'll be back to
back
Cleveland.
To the Cavs. Thanks
I'm following LeBron.
Oh, LeBron all the way, huh?
Right.
But you're also a big baseball fan. Baseball and boxing.
I used to be a pitcher when I was in PMA. And I belong to the baseball core squad. When you say core squad, that's the team of the PMA that would compete with other teams. And then I was also a boxer. And this is where I got...
really? You're a
because, I think my division at the time was featherweight. And before the featherweight division, there would be lower or lighter divisions, lower divisions. And I would notice that we were only using the same mouthpiece, one for each corner. So there were only 2 mouthpieces available. And when I noticed that, and it was my turn, and they would just dip it into a bucket of water. And then the next division would go into the ring and start boxing. When I noticed that, I refused to, because when I was about to use the mouthpiece, I kept on
gagging siguro.
Yeah, because
sana naman may alcohol.
Because I was thinking, so I removed it. When I removed it and I started boxing, and I made giggle before I would box my opponent, and I was met with a knee, and so it went through. I got several stitches here. I got out of the ring on a stretcher to the station hospital.
Knock out.
And not necessarily knock, but knock out, but technical knockout.
Yeah.
So, and then the following week, because every week there's a fight, among, in all divisions. So next week, I had the stitches removed because I had to enter the ring again.
Wow,
so
doesn't give up.
But I was,
What's your signature move, sir? You have your uppercut
left hook because I'm left-handed. I'm ambidextrous actually.
Ambidextrous. Wow, watch out for Secretary Lacson. So lots to keep you busy, supposedly, if you had the time. Now you left, after your career in PNP, then as a senator you left, now you're back in government. People are speculating you might be running for elections. Any plans to go?
Of government.
No, really? So no plans for higher office?
No.
That's it. So now busy with the PAR. Let's talk, we talked about it earlier, but again, preparing for the Pope's visit. What are we expecting now?
Well, I just hope that things get moving faster, especially in the implementation phase. And then when the Pope visits in January, I think 10 to 15, you will see a lot of improvement or a lot of reconstruction already completed.
You have quite a stellar lineup of awards and commendations. Let me just read some of them. I can't read all. You received the PMA Alumni Cavalier Award, Metrocom Officer of the Year in 1982, commendations from President Ramos, Secretary Renato de Villa, PMA Alumni Achievement Award, 1998 Outstanding Policeman of the Philippines.
POPP.
POPP, sorry. So how do you feel about all these awards and recognitions?
Well, these are rewards that one can get when he does his job as a law enforcer or in whatever capacity. And ito yung mga simple rewards na we value and we treasure for the rest of our lives. But at the same time, when you get criticisms, sometimes you feel that you don't deserve those criticisms and you don't feel good. You feel disappointed. And right now, I feel disappointed that I'm still in public service because, no matter what you do, it seems that, but that's a natural thing, di ba? You cannot please everybody naman.
Well, despite the difficulties, what would you say keeps you going? I mean, maybe some examples of moments that really touch you.
I always have this passion of performing well in whatever capacity, in whatever assignment I'm given by higher authorities. I'll make the point that I perform well and I excel in whatever assignment.
And that's very important dealing with politics. Now, going back to the administration now, of course, there's a lot of difficulties that you have to deal with and therefore you have to excel. Are you finding a lot of humps along the road with the Aquino administration that are blocking your work?
First, when I came up with a revelation about 2 or 3 cabinet secretaries who were uncooperative, things got better after that because the president during cabinet meeting called the attention of everybody for that matter. But I thought he also talked to the 2 because he asked me kung sino yung dalawa. And I told him. And after that, things improved a lot.
That's good.
The coordinative efforts that we were doing, parang gumaang talaga ng gumaang.
Parang sa Pilipinas, kailangan name and shame. You think here it works, kailangan embarrass sila para mahiya and then they do something. Do you feel that's what's working?
I prepare a euphemism, not embarrass, but put them on the spot.
Tama.
Okay.
Just put them on the spotlight. So, So what would you say is your secret to, you don't even want to be in politics, but you're still here, you're being successful in your work? What is
just be consistent in what you're doing. Be consistent with your values, your integrity, and everything. Kasi people, if you're not consistent, people will see through it. Kasi if you're just pretending to be like this or like that, lalabas at lalabas din yan.
Yeah. All right, so there's a lot of work ahead of you. What can we expect from now till maybe the next year, coming 2016?
Well, maybe another set of frustrations because nasabit na namin yung CRRP and comes now the implementation phase. And I think we'll be getting more criticisms pagka hindi nagawa yung nasa ground. And that's another challenge because all we have in our office is coordination, nothing more. Of course, we can exercise oversight. Pero kung wala ring teeth, wala ring ngipin, and you oversee projects as they are being implemented, then there's nothing much that can be done.
So if there's something you could add on to this office, since you're saying it's just coordination, sometimes there's frustrations because people demand so much from your office. What kind of support could you use?
Well, I'm thinking of talking to the president and ask him how much help does he still need from our office. And if he needs us to be more effective, then probably he can give us more authority.
Right. Well, it's his last 2 years in office. Do you think that he's going to accomplish a lot more? What is he trying to do you think, in these last 2 years?
Well, again, I'll go back to consistency. I think the president is consistent enough in all his advocacies, in spite of all the criticism that he's getting now from some sectors. I think he'll pull through with the flying colors.
Yeah. Well, you left quite a
I believe in his integrity. I still believe in him. And I think that's one formula to being a successful leader.
Oh, very well said. Now, if there's some legacy that you'd like to be remembered for, what would that be?
Well, I want the Yolanda survivors to get back on their feet. And we want to provide them better environment, better condition, better situation than before they were hit by Yolanda. We base our comprehensive plan on the pre-Yolanda numbers. For example, 17.4% yung kanilang contribution sa national GDP. And we hope that we can up those numbers because yung 6 regions, 29.5 million people yung population done. Tapos yung contribution sa agriculture 26.8%. So malaki yung tama. So dapat maitaas lahat yun to answer the build back call or build back better call of the president.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Secretary Lacson. A lot of work ahead of you. Thank you for all you do and all the best.
Thank you very much.
To all you do. And thank you very much once again to our guest, Secretary Ping Lacson. That's News Cafe for tonight. See you again next Thursday. Thanks for watching News Cafe. I'm Mitzi Borromeo. Good night.